evening. As you can see, I have got too many boxes in my hands, so I'm just trying to position them here so that I can move around freely, but within a certain circuit. Okay, so I am Paula. I am the research manager at Aspire2 International, and I have I do have a doctorate in digital media, but here's a disclaimer. It's not just you, but I am technologically challenged as well. But I like observing people who use technology, and I am very keen on observing the impact of technology on the society we live in. So that's where I come from. But before I begin, what are the keywords that come to your mind when I mention digital marketing, which is the theme for the evening?
Facebook.
Okay, great. And
Social media.
social media, okay. There was something from here?
Pain.
Pain, okay. Okay, yeah, I heard that over there. Was that? Okay. Well, I can't say that I am fully informed about all of these because in today's world, it's really difficult to be fully informed on anything, right? Would you agree with me? So we live in a society that we term, that is going through an information overload, right? Let me move to the next slide. Say if I give you an activity right now, if I ask you to read through all the posts on Twitter that show up on your feed in one day, do you think that's possible? It's not, right? So that is an example of information overload. That is how much of information we have access to. And that brings me to the concept of push marketing. Say, for example, you want to buy, you really fancy this pair of sports shoes. So you go online, you look up the features, but after some time, you go back to the same link to find out where you can get, the best deal. And now you see there is, these really very fancy pants that the advertiser says goes really well with those pair of shoes. And you end up clicking on the pants to look up the features. And the features fascinate you so much that you end up buying the pants immediately. So what's happening here, you are looking for information for a pair of shoes, but in no time, you end up buying a pair of pants, which you didn't even know existed a few minutes ago. Okay, so what is happening is we are pulling for information on the internet, and certain information is pushed towards us, which we are falling prey to. The same way, you catch fish, you trap a fish in the sea of information with a bait. Okay, so let me get my notes back. Okay, so this is the age we are living in. I'll let you absorb, this information. This is what happened in 2019 in 1 internet minute. But, I'll just move on from here. So what's happening is, I am a big fan of Mark Andreevich's work. I don't know if you have heard of him. He's a social media guru at the Monash University. And he wrote about, he writes a lot about information overload and how the social media is taking over our lives. So he mentions that in 2003, 2 years after 9/11, Washington Post had reported about a variety of public and private agencies that were collecting information without a stop. So much of information that it is literally impossible to comprehend, what information they are collecting and why they are collecting. So from that, the figures that he mentions are 1.7 billion emails and phone calls were intercepted on a daily basis. So you can imagine the volume of information. And only a fraction of that information was sorted into 70 databases or 70 categories, from which 50,000 intelligence reports were published every year, of which most were never read. Okay, so and that happened 17 years ago. So you can gauge how much more information we have access to now, or these agencies have access to now. So, are there any data analysts in this crowd, in the audience? Okay, so you would agree with me that the metadata that you have access to is very messy. There is no, you can't really make any sense to it unless, and of course, I think one of the microphones have gone perhaps. Yeah. Unless and of course, you do have a structure, you're given a structure, you know what you're looking for. And that's when you can make sense of that data, of that information that is given to you, right? So the metadata is not individual information. It won't be like Paula, who works at Aspire2 International, has these preferences. It would be more like, in New Zealand, this woman of this age, this demography, this origin has these kind of preferences. That's the kind of data that is collected by these agencies. So one of the main challenges faced by data analysts is how to treat the data that they have access to in a data saturated world. And that brings us to the concept of data mining, where they are trying to make sense of the data that they are given. And that brings us to surveillance of users. But before I go there, I want to bring up two concepts. One is the concept of Panopticon. Are you aware of this term? Anyone? Okay, so Jeremy Bentham came up with this concept in the 18th century, and this is the concept that is followed in surveillance. Say, for example, this is Jeremy Bentham's example. He says that in a prison, which could be in the shape of a tower, there are several windows. And the prisoners, the inmates, are told that there are guards at every window. So there are pairs of eyes at every window. So what do the inmates do? They behave themselves, they follow the rules. But if at any point you remove some of the guards, some of the eyes, and you don't inform the inmates, they continue to behave themselves because they are not aware of no one monitoring them. The same thing happens at traffic signals. We follow the rules, the road rules, because we see that camera at the light. But what is the guarantee that that camera is actually working? That could just be a dummy. No one could be monitoring it. But we don't want to take a chance, and so we continue to follow the rules. Okay, so this is exactly what is happening around us, where we know that some agencies are monitoring our internet movements. Well, the word internet actually comes from international network, right? I'm sure this crowd is very informed on this. So that is the kind of network we are talking about that is globally connected, and that is the flow of information. Okay, so when we know, we are all aware that there are these agencies that are monitoring our movements. So we are actually trying to, we know what kind of information to not look for in what places. So we are very careful about the kind of information we are looking for. So our browsing is very specific. Okay, but in that sense, we do have control. We have some control. But what is happening is, these digital marketing professionals, the practitioners, they are using that information to direct very specific information towards us. Okay, it's actually making their job much easier. And also at the same time, we are also getting the information that we are actually looking for. So it's working both ways. And the other concept is of, if again, this is a known fact that the ads that would show up on my Facebook or my Google would be very different from another person's ads sitting right next to me, right? We all know about this. Now, this is because the platforms, all these platforms, they use algorithms to cater to our preferences. Now, what are algorithms? They are just a set of rules that are applied for problem solving. So if this set of rules solves this problem, we have another problem. If the problem is similar, we apply the same set of rules. So that's how the ads are chosen. The information that is pushed towards us is selected. So this is the same way. The surveillance or the monitoring of these agencies work, where they use consumer profiling to direct that kind of similar information towards the consumers. But at the same time, do you realize that we have turned into prosumers, which is a combination of producers and consumers? We are producing information to decide what kind of information we are going to consume. Okay, so we are doing both, and this gives us an edge over all these agencies that are trying to push information towards us. And I just heard Jan mention about artificial intelligence. So there is this, that's like the latest buzzword, right? But why this big hullabaloo about artificial intelligence? Have we not used it ever? Can you think of any way in which you have used artificial intelligence when you were much younger? Any example?
Leaving a milk bottle out because you want to have a bottle of milk. You're telling the milk person you want a bottle of milk. That in itself is artificial intelligence, because you're giving out information to somebody else, so somebody else can collect it. It's mechanical, but it's exactly the same thing as what we're doing today.
Exactly. But I will take it a step further. And what do we use when we use a washing machine or a microwave oven? Isn't that artificial intelligence? Very basic form of it. And like every technology around us, AI has also evolved over the years. But if we think of artificial intelligence as what happens inside a washing machine, doesn't that simplify all the concepts in our mind? So I would like you to think of AI in those terms, just a bit more sophisticated than that. So why is AI the buzzword these days? It's because all this mammoth volume of information that we have access to, it has become humanly impossible to collect that information, sort it out, and store it in some kind of structure, in some making some kind of sense to that information and storing it. And that's why these agencies are using automation or machine to do that, because it's humanly impossible. Okay, and so more and more, the more we have access to information, the more information that is created, the more automation we will require to gather, sort, and store them. Okay, so that's why we are talking about AI so much. Because all these agencies, they end up collecting anything and everything they have access to, in the hope that sometime in the future, some pattern will emerge in those information, in those data. So there is really so framelessness of data is one of the biggest features, and which I believe data analysts would agree with, that the data that is collected has no framework, has no structure. And hence the use of AI. Now, some of the prominent users of AI are Google, Facebook, and the MMOGs. So what Google is doing, it uses consumer profiling and then comes up with marketing strategies based on the profiling. But there are certain techno-legal gaps, like, what kind of, if they're breaching any privacy acts, because, they are maybe collecting too much of personal information, and then they are selling it to the marketers. So, maybe, that is a gray area. But the understanding is what Google collects is the metadata and not individual specific information. What is Facebook doing? Facebook is using third-party surveillance, so they are hiring agencies to monitor the users, and then they are taking that information and selling it to advertisers and making money out of it. Okay, so they are using AI in this format. What MMOGs, or the massive multiplayer online gaming sites, what they are doing is they are using algorithmic surveillance and and coming up with algorithmic strategies, like if player A with this kind of profile likes game X, then player B with a similar profile will also like game X, and so let's let them play together, play against each other. Okay, so that's how the profiling is done, and then they are, those strategies are developed. Now, what is happening with all this? What is the social impact from all these developments around us? We have turned our society into a predictive and preemptive world. Like, whatever we want to do, we are thinking about it, and it is already in front of us. We don't have to do much because the platforms we are using already knows what our preferences are and feeding us that information. Okay, that's what happens when you start typing or start running a search on Google. It starts predicting what our preferences would be, what kind of information we are looking for. And that is turning us into info gluts. This is another word that Andreevich has come up with. This is just another word for information overload. So we are turning into information gluttons, is what he's trying to say. So what is happening in this kind of world? With these kind of changes in the society, the way humans interact with each other has also transformed. So these days we trust digital information over what we gather face to face from another individual. So face to face interaction is not considered that much important as digital information about the same person would be. To the extent that employers are looking up social media profiles of prospective employees, and because they trust that over the CV that they have submitted, or even before they meet the person, even before they meet the candidate, they are looking up the social media profiles. So all this has turned our society into a censor society, quite similar to, have you heard about the refrigerators that are apparently in the market that can sense the milk that is inside the fridge? When it goes bad, it just sends out a signal, some kind of a beeping sound or a light, a flashing light, something like that. So what is happening when so much of our work is already done for us? What does that make of us? We are left with much more free time to create more information, to search for more information, and at the same time create new opportunities for surveillance. Thank you very much.